Welcome on into the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and it is time to go over my top 50 running backs in this video. We will not focus on that bottom tier so much, as really a lot of our focus will be put into that A tier, where we're going to see the most difference between myself and where I have my rankings and the expert consensus rankings, the average of a bunch of experts and where they're ranking these guys at this time of the year. And we're just going to splice this bit in here because I just realized as I finished recording that I forgot to say this. On Thursday evenings now, come join us starting this Thursday, June 11th, for some live mock drafting against other people that are mock drafting. We use the Sleeper app, so come prepared with that, and I just drop a link into the chat, and you can join on in, and we can do different types of formats, different scoring, different, 3 wide receiver, 2 wide receiver, based on requests coming in from you guys. So please join us. Love having a full room there. Got very close to doing that these last couple of years on a regular basis, so hopefully this year there will be extra demand for more drafting. All right, my S tier, the top tier, is almost identical to what the experts have, so we will end up starting off there. I would also just like to mention that these rankings are made based on projections that I've done. There will be more movement. There might be an additional tier or two thrown in by the time that we get through to, closer to draft day. But these are not really influenced by public opinion at this point in time. I do not listen to other people's fantasy football content at this time of the year in order to help keep a clear mind for this creation. So it is, I would say, not too much of a surprise that these top four are the top four given the ECR. They're my top four. I do have Jahmyr Gibbs and Christian McCaffrey flipped compared to the expert consensus ranking. That's it. That's the only difference. And I think part of the reason is just a little bit of a concern for that Detroit offense in terms of the depth and how well they'll be able to work through some injuries and how that might end up impacting the overall scoring upside of this Detroit offense, which we have come to, appreciate how many touchdowns they've been able to put up throughout games, etc., over the past few years. But these four are the no questions about the talent, about the situation surrounding the talent, and the production that we should be getting from them. They're my S tier guys. As you can see, that's kind of my description of the S tier here. And right behind them, at the top of my A tier, I do have a couple of names that I am directly in agreement with the expert consensus ranking as well on. And I don't think that they're going to be moving from my 5 and 6 spot. I feel pretty concrete about them at the top of the A tier, but I also just don't feel as comfortable about them as I do for these top four guys, and that is going to be James Cook and Devon Achane. Now comes to my first big difference that I have with the experts at my running back 7, and that is Josh Jacobs. He is my running back 7, but the expert consensus rankings have him as the running back 16. Now, he finished last year as the running back 5, and when I am referencing running back X finish for last season, I am referencing a average fantasy points per week number, and I'm not referencing the official average fantasy points per week number. I am referencing one that is my own upkeep, which means that I go through and I do clear out if a guy like Josh Jacobs gets hurt on the first play of the game. I'm not going to count that performance against what I expect from him when he is fully healthy for any given game on average. So it is cleaned up a little bit in that sense. It tends to be pretty similar to average fantasy points per week, but it does tend to be more accurate through some backtesting that I have done in the past. And that is also I guess the main takeaway for me on Josh Jacobs at this point, if you're able to get him roughly around the 15th running back off of the board, I think that kind of puts him into gem territory. I think that as long as the ADP is similarly quote-unquote low on him, in my opinion, he's a really good get that you can get. I think that this Green Bay offense will still be good. Now, there are some question marks about the Green Bay offense and whether it will be as good as it was last year, the year before. That, I think, is a legitimate concern that could exist out there. I just tend to think it'll probably be okay. There's some concerns there as a Green Bay Packer fan, though. Can't say for sure. Now, Right behind that, I am once again going to fall pretty much in line with the experts, with Chase Brown as my running back 8 and Omarion Hampton as my running back 9, as well as Ken Walker being my running back 10 if I can find him. Running back 11, I do have a bit of a difference between myself and the experts. It's not a big difference. The experts have him ranked 14th. I have him ranked 11th. He did finish as the running back 10 last offseason, and I do understand why people could be a little bit concerned if he'll be able to repeat that again, with the Blake Corum splits being what it is. I'm expecting the Blake Corum split and his split to be the same as it was last year. I don't think there's much motivation for the team to take more snaps away from Kyren Williams and give them to Blake Corum. Of course, we'll listen to off-season news, and if word is that Blake Corum looks better than Kyren Williams, we can start to flip our opinions there. But in terms of the production, I'm really expecting something similar to what we got last year for him. I expect this to be a very good offense, which should help this offense, a very good defense, which should help this offense also to be able to continue to run throughout the entirety of games, throughout most games, in terms of that consistency factor as well. So I feel very comfortable with what I'm going to get from Kyren Williams on a week-in and week-out basis. Maybe not the highest ceiling, but a very high floor guy. That'll bring us on to Derrick Henry, who I have right behind him, right in line with the experts as running back 12. And then we've got Bucky Irving coming up next. I am a little bit high on Bucky. He's my running back 13. The experts have him ranked 19th, so a pretty decent split there. Last year he finished as the running back 11 on a per-week basis. Now, that sample size for his per-week basis is a small sample size. He did miss a big chunk of last season, but if you go back a year from now, he was top 10 in the ADP. People were taking him as a top 10 running back, 7th, 8th even. I don't think the situation has changed a whole lot here for the worse in terms of like where he's going to be splitting carries. Rachaad White was in the backfield last year. That was even a concern at that point of potentially could he end up eating up more and not making Bucky Irving worth it that high in the draft as well. And then now we've got Kenneth Gainwell, and I just don't see some big difference between the demand for usage between Kenneth Gainwell and Rachaad White, despite the fact that Ken Gainwell did have a very good season last season. But also, I generally think that this Buccaneers offense is going to be better than it was last year. They had a lot of injuries last year, including a shoulder injury to the quarterback, which I do think impacted his play, despite it not being his being his non-throwing shoulder. That was also the same type of injury that ended up getting him ousted in Cleveland. But this offensive line should be healthier. They had suffered a lot of injuries. That should help the running game. So I'm once again just expecting more of the same from Bucky Irving, roughly, in general speaking there. At running back 14, we see another difference between myself and the experts. Not a big difference here. I have him ranked 14th. The experts have him ranked 17th. He finished running back 12 last year. And just like Bucky Irving, I'm just kind of expecting more of the same. We don't have a big name coming in that's going to be competition for Javonte Williams. And in terms of this offense, I once again do have a good amount of faith in this offense in regards to the fact that on a weekly basis, it kind of doesn't matter how good or bad the defense is that they're facing. I think that they can be consistently productive on a week-in and week-out basis. They've got a good set of weapons, a good quarterback. It's all just pretty darn good in terms of that offense. That'll bring us on, and maybe that defense will be better this year, which should then allow them for Javonte Williams to be able to run later in games and rack up a little bit more of the, some of those bigger games late on due to extra usage. That will bring us on to my 15th running back is Breece Hall. That's right in line with the experts. And then we have one of the big surprises. Saquon Barkley still on the board for me at running back 16. He comes off, and that is significantly lower than the experts. We're still in the same tier here. Running back 9 is where the experts have him ranked to my 16th. I did not change anything in my projections compared to the workload that he had last season. I really have him projected for a very similar type of workload than he had last year. And last year he finished as the running back 15. Now, of course, Saquon Barkley is a fantastic running back, so yeah, do I feel ultra comfortable being low guy on a guy like Saquon Barkley, especially coming off of what we got from him 2 years ago? Not really. And I am generally fairly confident in this Philadelphia offense. However, there's a lot of moving pieces, and they did lose A.J. Brown. Whatever you think of that, that's a big loss still for this offense. It's going to be a totally different offense, and I'm fine with them getting rid of him. And once again, generally, I do have a decent amount of confidence for this offense. But there are some question marks. They are going to be relying on some rookie production in order to really be a good offense. And I think, once again, like this offensive line gets a little bit older in some areas and potentially is fairly thin. Not too sure about the depth in that offensive line room precisely. So I just have some concerns about Saquon Barkley being better than what he was last year. I do like the new offensive scheme there. Could end up giving him more targets, but he did have a decent amount of target share last year as well in that offense, so I don't know for sure about that. That will bring us on to my next player, DeAndre Swift. I have him ranked 17th, and this is significantly higher than the experts, possibly even a bit of a tier difference between myself and the experts on DeAndre Swift. He finished running back 19 last season, so I'm a little bit higher than that. The experts are a little bit lower than that. And one thing that I did want to look at for DeAndre Swift is, as the season went along, as Kyle Manangai became a bigger factor in this offense, he really wasn't a factor throughout the early portion of the season, the first 6-ish games or so. If we even take that production off of DeAndre Swift and we just look at the rest of the production, once again, once Kyle Manangai became a bigger part of this offense, we still see that DeAndre Swift actually performed slightly, probably negligibly better throughout that time period, and I think that that can be attributed to this being a new offensive coordinator for them in the early season. They're still learning the offensive system, as well as having a second-year quarterback who, frankly, was not ultra impressive in his first year, and is once again, for him, learning another new offense. Things came together as the season went along, and I expect that progression to continue. I do expect the Chicago Bears offense to be better than it was last year. I feel fairly confident about that. So all those factors combined, I just think DeAndre Swift has some room to be even better than what he was last year and fits right into this range at the back end of this tier. Once again, with room to be even better. He finished 9th in my projections. My projections really liked him. There is the question mark, will Kyle Manangai get even more work? And that is a legitimate concern and reason where maybe I'm not taking that into account enough here, and we'll listen to the offseason news to see if that becomes something we get a little bit more concerned about. At running back 18, I have Ashton Jeanty. Another big difference here from the experts. The experts have him all the way up at running back 7. I have him 18th. He finished last year as running back 21. I like a lot of the pieces on this offense, so from that aspect, I do think there is a decent chance that this offense will be better than it was last year. I don't know how much we really did to improve the running game here, although I guess center, pretty big acquisition there at center there for this offensive line. And I like Ashton Jeanty, so he is a guy who I will almost certainly come closer to running back 7, but I do think running back 7's high. If I'm low on him at running back 18, I think the experts are currently too high on him at running back 7. That's really asking for a lot to go right, and I think we should feel safer with him, at the very least just borderline around top 10 there, but even then, I don't feel ultra safe with it. Of course, this group, we do have some questions in general about these guys compared to that S tier, and that's why they're in this tier. And he is in the same tier as all of these guys, so if your personal expectations are higher, I'm not going to sit here and rag you for that, but yeah, I'm just a little bit lower on him. My projections for him didn't come out the best. You're going to have a rookie quarterback at some point, and you're going to have a veteran quarterback who, frankly, hasn't looked the best over the past year and a half, or 2 years, really. I just still have concerns about that situation and not expecting that offense to be really high scoring in terms of that touchdown upside, which really helps to push guys into that top 10 type of territory. That will bring us on to my 19th ranked running back, still in the A tier, and that is Cam Skadaboo. I'm right in with the experts on him. He did do quite well in my projections. He did finish last year as the 6th best running back in a small sample size, but I think getting him here is one of those guys where you might end up getting something better, but also with the injury and everything, I also fell back after. That was really one scene where the experts were at him. I thought about it again, and I was like, okay, let's move him out. So that's kind of a wrinkle that I cleared up here before filming. And then at running back 20, we've got another big difference in Jeremiah Love compared to myself and the experts. Jeremiah Love ranked 13th by the ECR. I am 20th. So pretty big difference there. James Conner was running back 12 last year, and this previous offense has been very effective for running backs in recent years. It is a new offensive scheme coming in, so there's one hitch in the wagon potentially that could end up causing this running back room to maybe not be as productive as it has been with the previous offensive staff, as well as the fact that this is a rookie running back coming into a pretty talented running back room, a room a lot of us, didn't really agree with Jeremiah Love going 3rd overall to them because of what they are, in part because of what they already had in that room. And I just do think that this is going to be more of a split than what most people are thinking. And I was lower in recent draft seasons on Bijan Robinson and Travion Henderson for the same reason. And in both of those cases, that is exactly what happened. I ended up being more correct on them than the experts and then the ADP on those guys. We get excited about these rookie running backs, but the league doesn't just always come out and give them the full workload, especially when they have established veterans right behind them on the depth chart. They'll kind of ease them in, maybe get a little bit more out of that second contract out of that player then as well by allowing them to learn the game, get the most out of them when they're in their prime, and not put as much tread on their tires early on in their career as you might need to, given the talent that you already have on your roster. So, yeah, I'm just, a little bit lower on Jeremiah Love. And if he was on a better offense, I'd get more excited about it. But I'm not really expecting this Arizona offense to be a top half of the league type of offense. That'll bring us on to the B tier. Those are my A tier, my S tier guys, the top 20 running backs. And right at the top of the B tier, Travis Etienne is very much borderline B tier, A tier. Could easily go up a little bit. The experts are a little bit higher on him than myself, but we're pretty close in line there. Same with Travion Henderson, right about in line with the ECR. But here's where we're going to see a little bit of difference with my next guy in Jadarian Price. He is my running back 23. The experts have him ranked running back 27. And this is a little bit of a bet on expecting Zach Charbonnet to miss more than just like half of the season. I'm expecting Zach Charbonnet to not really be available until the later portion of the season, and even then there should be a wrap-up period. There is a reason that they invested in Jadarian Price, and I assume even by their own board, drafting him a little bit higher than they would have wanted to, think they would have liked to trade back and then still get him even a little bit high there because they believed in him. I'm not the biggest believer in Jadarian Price, but I do love the situation for him, and he projects out pretty well in my projections. The Seattle defense is very good, giving them, keeping them within games, even close games, to where they can still continue to run. They like to run the ball. I feel pretty good about Jadarian Price in terms of the opportunity. It's just a talent question. If I liked his talent even more, I would go even higher on him than this. But I think you can feel pretty good about it. One of those guys where maybe the plan is, if he pops off throughout the first 6-7 weeks of the year, trade him off before the conversation about when Zach Charbonnet is going to come back really starts to swell and boil over, and get the most for him at that point in time. But once again, I really don't know that Zach Charbonnet is going to be much of a factor against Jadarian Price for much of this year. And so I think you're going to get more games out of him than a Quinshon Judkins. More better games, obviously. I think he's just going to be a little bit better than Quinshon Judkins, but this is a very close battle. I am a little bit lower than the experts on Quinshon Judkins. He finished running back 20 last year. I have him 24th. I don't feel ultra comfortable with that, but this is another situation where I also don't really expect this offense to be good. That being said, he finished running back 20 last year, and do I think this offense will be better than it was last year? kind of, yeah, probably. So I'm probably a little bit low on Quinshon Judkins, but I just, I like the upside of Travion Henderson a little bit more. I like the floor of Quinshon Judkins a little bit more. I like ETN's floor probably more than Quinshon Judkins, just having more faith in that offense. But it's very close here with these top guys. And even Jaylen Warren, I think, is very much in this conversation at the top of the B tier. I'm pretty much in line with the experts. I do believe my projections liked him even a little bit more than this, so I feel pretty confident about where you can get him in drafts, that he's going to pay off for you. And that's, I think, a similar story here for David Montgomery. Feel good about him, roughly in line with the experts on him. The experts have these two flipped compared to how I have them. And then Chuba Hubbard, also in this conversation as a guy who, you don't love the ceiling, probably not the best offense in the world, but for where you're getting him in the draft, you're probably getting an appropriate value on the player. I'm just, me, the experts, we're all in agreement on these guys pretty heavily. But then we've got J.K. Dobbins next up in my rankings as my running back 28, and he's not, he's ranked 35th from the experts. The experts are quite a bit lower on him. He finished running back 21 last season, and when he has been the starting running back and healthy, he has been very good. He has been better than running back 28, better than running back 35. The big issue for J.K. Dobbins is he's really never made it through an entire season. There are some very big health concerns for J.K. Dobbins that make him a little bit unreliable as a guy that you can trust week in and week out, because he's probably going to have an injury at some point. But otherwise, I really do think that he's going to maintain a similar role as to where they had him last season. Now, I have to scroll down just a little bit, get rid of that S tier on my screen so I can see these bottom ones a little bit better. But that's going to bring us to the back end of the B tier, and once again, I'm pretty much in line with the experts. I do have Ramondre Stevenson as my running back 30. I have Tony Pollard as running back 29, then Ramondre Stevenson, followed by R.J. Harvey, followed by Rico Dowdle, and followed by Kyle Manangai. Rico Dowdle, Kyle Manangai, just R.J. Harvey, Ramondre Stevenson, really those four could be considered into that C tier. They're maybe not quite the running back by committee leaders in their offenses, but they also have the opportunity. They might be the running back by committee leaders in their offenses. Like, that's potential, and we feel pretty comfortable that they're going to have a fantasy relevant role within the offenses that they're in. So they just make it into the back end of this tier for me. That's going to bring us on to the C tier, which starts off with Ken Gainwell, Aaron Jones. I'm right in line with the experts on these two. They're also borderline in that B-C tier. This is the tier of, these were the running back by committee guys. There is some legitimate threat to the overall amount of usage for these guys. Now we're moving more into potential sleeper opportunities. So Ken Gainwell, Aaron Jones, like these guys could end up outproducing where we're taking them. There's, I would say, especially in the case of Aaron Jones, maybe I should have Jones higher than Ken Gainwell for that reason. There is certainly that possibility. I might end up having Aaron Jones. I might flip those two, which the experts do have them one spot apart, just a little bit lower than myself. But then we do have one of the bigger differences that we will talk about here in this tier, and that is Chris Rodriguez, who I think could end up being a bit of a sleeper for where you can get him via ECR. I think I have him ranked maybe a little bit closer to his ceiling than we should be. By the way, we're talking half PPR in this video, so full PPR is going to change the rankings on some guys, as well as standard format. You feel better about Chris Rodriguez in standard format. In full PPR, I would certainly end up moving him down a little bit further in my rankings. But via my projections, I am currently projecting Chris Rodriguez to be the primary rushing back for the Jags, the first, second down back for them this season. Touchdown opportunities, think that he'll probably be the one to get a lot of those. Goal line, I should say, not touchdown, but goal line opportunities. So for those reasons, I'm a little bit higher on Chris Rodriguez. It's far from a guarantee if that's actually how they're going to utilize this backfield, but I do think that that would make sense, and that's what I'm projecting. We'll see if that ends up being the case. We'll take in the news as we learn news throughout the offseason, and that could end up pushing Chris Rodriguez down for sure. Alvin Kamara, I am surprised to see the experts so low on him. The experts have him ranked 50th overall. I've got him here 37th overall. He finished last year's running back 37. I projected a 60-40 split between him and ETN. I am expecting Alvin Kamara to continue to have a similar role as he's had in this offense in recent seasons, with a better starting running back there for sure in Travis Etienne. But I still think when you are using Alvin Kamara at a limited role, I still think it's in there for him. I still think he can be effective for them and hold up to a roughly 60-40 split. And with that kind of split, this is, where he's coming out in my projections roughly. Now, is the upside the best for him? Probably not, but I don't know. If there's an injury to Travis Etienne, is there really? And I think he then takes over the Etienne role and becomes the RB1 in once again a committee. So, there's some upside to that. I think more upside than running back 50 offers. That's going to bring us on to Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. I'm right in line with the experts there, and could maybe get him higher than some of these guys. I would understand that. I'll have to look at that one a little bit closer yet again. Then we've got Blake Corum here at running back 39. I'm a little bit lower than the experts on him. Experts have him ranked 34th. Jonathan Brooks, I'm a little bit higher on Jonathan Brooks than the experts, like 5 spots as my running back 40. I think right now on the offseason, there is a decent enough chance that he could be the starting running back. And if that's going to be the case, then he's going to end up being a good value here. He's a guy I really liked coming out of college. He has suffered some major severe injuries that have prevented him from ever doing anything at the NFL level. And, what is he? We don't know. But if he wins that starting job, then I think, hey, maybe he has returned to something of his old self. And once again, for where you're going to be able to get him in drafts, at least currently, could end up being a nice value. Then we've got Bashal Tutin, who I am lower on dramatically from the experts. The experts have him ranked 25th overall. I'm 41st overall. He was running back 48 last year. He's just been a guy who's been kind of a lot of people liked him last year. I wasn't really on board with that and ended up being correct about that. We'll see if I'm correct about him this year. I don't think I'm going to quite get that high on Bashal Tutin, but of course, part of that just has to do with how I'm projecting this backfield. Chris Rodriguez being the starting guy means that I have left Bashal Tutin for some third down work, but splitting that with a really good third down running back that they grabbed last year, as well as getting something like every third drive, one of those types of splits with Chris Rodriguez. And he's almost certainly going to be the guy to get that 2-minute offensive work, which can be quite valuable, although it's inconsistent because it requires several factors in order to come into play for that to come through. But when it comes through for you, that 2-minute offensive back can really put up some fantasy points quickly, especially in a full PPR type of situation. So when it comes to full PPR, I think that there's no question in that kind of format that he should be higher than Chris Rodriguez, even if I have their roles in this offense correctly projected. And that probably gets him closer to being into that RJ Harvey territory there where you can see. So RJ Harvey is my running back 31. So then I'm a lot closer in that type of situation to where the experts currently have Bashal Tutin. But for half PPR, the roles that I'm expecting, I think you'll end up being a little bit disappointed with what you're going to get at running back 25. That will bring us on to Isaiah Pacheco. I am a little bit higher than on him. Same with, Woody Marks, I'm actually right about in line. But Isaiah Pacheco, I'm a little bit higher than the experts on. I think that this could end up being a very nice role for him in Detroit. Once again, on an offense that, although I do have some concerns for it, I still generally am going to be quite positive on. And so in terms of a backup, I think he's one of the best backups that you can get around the league. And I do think, although he's not going to quite do the David Montgomery role thing, he might do a fair bit of the David Montgomery role thing, enough that in a pinch you could use him in a week and just hope for that touchdown on top of a baseline of work. for like 10 fantasy points at that point. That'll bring us on to Jordan Mason. I'm a little bit lower on him, just maybe some concerns about that Minnesota offense compared to where I view some of these other offenses. Rashad White, a little bit lower on him than the experts actually. Tyrone Tracy, a little bit lower on him than the experts. Then we've got Tyjae Spears, right in line with the experts, followed by Tyler Algier, and finally Brian Robinson. And there's a couple of names right behind this group that could probably filter in, and maybe Brian Robinson could filter back a little ways. But San Francisco backup running back, assuming that's him, it might not be, but it could be a very valuable role. So those are the rankings: S tier, A tier, B tier, roughly top 50. Thank you so much for tuning on in. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe on the video. We will get through probably the quarterbacks next and then the wide receivers. You take care, and I'll see you soon.